A series of 8 small satellites to be deployed in low Earth orbit will sample wind speeds frequently each day to give forecasters a better impression of hurricanes and how they might form and gain in strength. The satellites, which will all launch at once from a single rocket, make up the mission known as CYGNSS, short for Cyclone Global Navigation Satellite System.
This technology, which is low power, also happens to be the only way that you can see through heavy rain.
The CYGNSS satellites will communicate with the GPS satellites. This way, with 8 satellites taking measurements, the area of Earth that can be measured is increased greatly. Successive satellites passing over the same region every 12 minutes. As the CYGNSS and GPS constellations move around the Earth, the interaction of the 2 systems will result in a new image of wind speed over the entire tropics every few hours, compared to every few days for a single satellite. Another advantage, the CYGNSS orbit is designed to measure only in the tropics, where hurricanes are most often found. The focus on tropical activity means the CYGNSS instruments will be able to gather that much more useful data on weather systems exclusively found in the tropics.
Normally we have to fly an aircraft into a hurricane to get that precise level of hurricane wind speeds.
CYGNSS will reach space aboard an unusual rocket. This is Pegasus, and it flies into space after dropping from an airplane, not leaving a launch pad.
So a launch off of Pegasus is very unique. It's the air-launched vehicle. So what that means is that the rocket is actually placed under a plane. The plane flies at about 39,000 feet, and then the rocket is released. 5 seconds later, it ignites and leaves the atmosphere.
Measuring 55 feet long, the Pegasus is built by Orbital ATK. It uses 3 stages that each burn solid propellants to lift its payload into orbit. For CYGNSS, the time from drop to ignition and then release of all 8 spacecraft in orbit will take less than 15 minutes. Although controllers keep tabs on the aircraft and rocket throughout the flight and launch, the drop from the aircraft can be the most intense.
Those are very long 5 seconds between the release of the rocket and the ignition of that first stage motor. The rocket guys they're turning on all sorts of stuff, but on console, I'm just holding my breath for 5 seconds until that motor ignites.
Although a Pegasus rocket can be launched virtually anywhere, the CYGNSS mission calls for a launch near Florida. That's because the main area the satellites will survey is the tropical region of the Atlantic, where many of the hurricanes that threaten the mainland United States form.
Because of the hurricane corridor, we have to launch from Florida.
The modified L-1011 aircraft, formerly used as an airliner, will take off from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station and head out over the Atlantic Ocean. About 110 miles off the coast of Daytona Beach, Florida, the aircraft carrying Pegasus will begin to fly a racetrack-shaped pattern over the ocean. When all systems check out and the launch director approves the drop, the crew on the aircraft will release the Pegasus to fly into space on its own.
We have a very defined box in space and time that we must drop the vehicle so that when we ignite the first stage of Pegasus, it puts us right in line for our mission orbit.
The CYGNSS mission had been slated to launch earlier this year, but when Hurricane Matthew brushed near Kennedy Space Center, the schedule had to be adjusted.
We were originally scheduled to launch CYGNSS earlier this year in the November timeframe, but as fate would have it, Hurricane Matthew had other things to say about the Eastern Range launch schedule, pushing us into the December timeframe. So it's probably appropriate for CYGNSS that we're launching a little bit later, but because of a hurricane.